1980s, where some of the things that he's saying would have been acceptable then. This is now. What he has said, in my opinion, is absolutely not acceptable. Yes, it probably has gone a little bit further. Do you know what I mean? I've seen it on Yahoo Sports. I've seen it on quite a few things, kind of retweeted. But having been on the receiving end of some misogynistic comments from him, if he is to get any sort of or be reprimanded for anything, he's really only brought it on himself, because people have told him time and time again, and I certainly think the way that this has now spiralled, that you basically have to stand up and take count. Yeah, he has put out apologies, there has been statements from clubs, but we all know that it's not actually going to change. Do you know what I mean? He's one of these people where those sort of opinions don't ever change, and it probably has been blown out of proportion. But do you know what I mean? I think in this day and age, it's something that you need to be very, very, very careful with. And it's quite clear that it has upset an awful lot of people.
I think it's difficult. I think, is it possible that because he's always managed to get away with things with the skin of his teeth, he's just never had to change? Has it lulled him into a kind of false sense?
No,
I mean, I've no doubt when he said, I wasn't there, but I've no doubt when he said it, he probably wasn't thinking about it the way, and it probably was meant to be a joke as such. But you must know, if you're on a public address, if you're on a podcast like this, if you're talking to the public, you must know there are some things that you can't say, unless that's the point of your podcast, of course, of being controversial and being un-PC. But you know, surely in his position, has it been the case he's just always got away with it, so he's never had to change?
It's a difficult, you know what? It's a difficult one, and I'm going to incur the wrath of probably quite a few people here. I'm sympathetic towards Dave Sims to a certain extent, partially because you and I are younger than him, but not that much younger than him, and I kind of get the fact that you know, he's a little bit stuck back in the 70s and 80s. He's a bit of a carry-on movie. If you watch a carry-on movie nowadays, you couldn't make a film like that nowadays because of the attitudes and the way things were back in the world back then. And some people move on with the times better than others. I like to think that I have done as much as I can. I would suggest that he hasn't as well as he could. But nevertheless, I still have a little bit of sympathy for that. Also, as you say, you weren't there. I wasn't there either. And I have seen quite a few comments from people who were there. And I don't really want to throw proportions at it because I'm only talking about my Twitter timeline, but there are a lot of people there who heard it and kind of got the joke as it was probably intended. And the suggestion even that you might have said similar to a straight couple at some other time, because it might be something that you might say. You see a couple kissing, that's disgusting, get them out here, as a kind of throwaway, not very funny, but you know, bit of a line, and that's it. So the best of it, if you're going to think of it in the best terms, is that's maybe how it was meant, okay? And the fact that it was two guys, the fact that these guys, it doesn't really matter that these guys weren't actually gay. It turns out, from what I'm told, that they were just having a laugh. I know that shouldn't really matter, but the fact is, and we'll come on to it, but as things have got a bit OTT in terms of the response, now you get false accusations in the Gay Times and all that sort of stuff. I mean, the whole thing's getting well out of hand from that point of view. But anyway, so it comes back to the fact that he probably intended it as a joke. Yes, he's a victim of his own track record. We all know about the Panthers comment that he made years ago, which he always maintained he has regretted ever since. He has a track record of opening his mouth and talking before the brain fully engages. And this is undoubtedly part of the same, because I'm not defending what he said, with a little bit of judgment, a little bit of a pause, just to think about what you're saying when this image comes up in the kiss cam. I'm sure most of us would think, you know what, I'm just going to stay away from that and whatever and move on. But Dave Sims doesn't. He makes a comment. Yeah, I can understand people being offended. I get all that. I can understand gay and straight people just having enough of the fact that here it's Dave Sims again. I get all that as well. But a lot of the initial reaction was fine, and I understood people being offended and wanting apologies or just waiting to see what he was going to do next. And And I'll come on to the apologies, but just very briefly, that wasn't good enough. Dave Sims really, frankly, should have gone on Periscope or recorded something to camera and let people see the whites of his eyes when he was apologising. Part of the problem, and this is again, which is what gets people annoyed, is that writing a few words and the Steelers PR was just rubbish. Written by I think it was Tony's son. I mean, just nonsense, rubbish with some typos in it as well. That's unacceptable. If you're going to issue an apology, especially for something as sensitive as this, you do it right. And Dave Sims didn't do it right. If I'd been him, I would have thought, okay, really potentially done it this time. Let's quickly record a message, look straight in the camera, tell people how sorry you are, try and get it right, and then get that out there. He didn't do that. Instead, we got a fairly potentially insincere sounding Twitter thing. So anyway, so the apology was all wrong, which hasn't done anything at all to extinguish how people feel, to the extent now that, and this is the point that I'm going to finish off on, the reaction has now gone the other way. It's got extremely evangelical. There's some people, one person in particular who I don't follow on Twitter. I thought I'd stopped following him a long time ago, but I did have a little look at his timeline at some point last night, just because some comments were appearing on my timeline inadvertently, so I kind of followed the trail, and I thought to myself, okay, this is where no matter how good a cause is, all of a sudden the response goes way the other way. And this is, I call it the Salem witch trials. This is what it gets like. It's gone way the other way. Okay, we've got Sheffield councillors involved now. It's gone on the NHL, Radar, Greg Wyshynski's, or through Yahoo Sports has put it on there. I mean, that's a standalone thing, and Greg Wyshynski's now reported in the EHL a few times this season, all for their own reasons, unfortunately. But that's just the way it goes. But when the reaction gets that evangelical, that's when certainly me, I start to switch off and think, no, that's it, it's run its course. And what you're then left with is just a few people who are extremely zealous in what they're trying to achieve, and it just starts to look like an agenda against Dave Sims, which it may very well possibly be, but it does slightly undermine their cause in the first place. And when it gets as zealous as that, I think most people just start to think, right, okay, that's it. It's run its course. Some action still needs to take place. There needs to be some statement from the EIHL. The statement from the Steelers was completely inadequate. The EIHL, and whatever guise that may be, Tony as chairman or whatever, but the EIHL need to issue some kind of statement. And whatever happens to Simsy, because I still maintain I think Simsy does more good than bad for the sport, but he has let himself down very, very, very badly here, and I think he handled the apology all wrong. So I don't know. If there's any way back from that, then I would hope there is. People want him fired and everything else. I'm not part of that faction, but I have to say, if it meant some kind of more serious action than it normally does for him, he has brought it on himself. So my sympathy is there, but it's extremely limited.
I have to say, watching, I know a lot of people thought, and I kind of agree, it was poorly worded press release, and the kind of video looked poorly constructed as well. However, I thought, looking at his face, I think he realises this is maybe one too far. I am always, however, of the belief that people deserve chances. But am I arguing, Jennifer, that he's already had a chance before and he's had chances in the past? Am I being too soft thinking? I mean, I'm kind of with Graham. I absolutely think what he said was wrong. I think it's ill-considered. I think he's a victim of his own attempts to be controversial sometimes. And he's always been one to maybe talk before he thinks. I think what he said and everything that happened that night was probably inappropriate and should have known better. I'm not covering up for him, but what would you want? What do you think should be the outcome? Do you think he should be banished, for example, from hockey?
I wouldn't go so too far to say he was banished, do you know what I mean? But certainly a little bit more of an apology from him. It's been pretty clear, like, what has gone out there is pretty insincere. Do you know what I mean? It's like saying one thing and doing another. There's actually no remorse, and it's quite clear that this is probably a situation where there's probably never going to be remorse. The unfortunate thing is we're living in 2017. You only need to look at climate and see how sensitive these subjects are. People like David Sims are never going. Do you know what I mean? They can be a little bit more apologetic. Well, they need to be a little bit more apologetic about it. But I think in this instance, I think it will eventually blow over. But I don't think banishing. I think a little bit more, but he just needs to be a little bit more sincere with his apology. Whether it be a case of he actually gets involved in something to do with LGBTQ and actually basically go out there and prove that this isn't an issue for him.
Yeah, I have to say, for somebody, the man loves hockey. Let's face it, he does a lot of work. He does a lot of good stuff. He came up to Braehead a couple of years ago, didn't charge anything, they just paid his hotel room, paid his petrol, and he was able to put on a good night, the profits of which went to the club, and he's done it for Manchester, he's done it around the league. In many ways, I'd hate to see somebody who loves the game so much have it taken away from them, but I think he does have to rein it in. And I think, Jennifer, you're spot on. I think if he can maybe get involved in some way with the LGBT community, then that would be a bonus, and that would show that he cares. But I think, as I said, Graham, looking at his face in that video, he knows that this one is touch and go this time.
Did he do? You're talking about a video? Did he do a video?
Yeah, it was on Twitter. It was released via Steelers, I believe, and he apologised. And a lot of people are saying the apology, he kept going back and saying, I apologise, but so if you're offended, not... It's as if he was putting the blame a wee bit on the offender, the offendee, if you like, rather than saying, okay, it's me, I shouldn't have said it.
It's the lack of remorse and the lack of insincerity for him.
I need to see that video then, because I'm waxing lyrical about him having to talk to the camera, and I've not seen that video. But yeah, as I say, if he came across in any way insincere, then that is just the wrong way to play it.
Anyway, moving on. We don't want to dwell on it too much because it's not
a
great deal to do with us. But it is. He's a very, very prominent figure in hockey, and as I say, I've always been a believer in people getting chances. But I just think as well he's been given loads. So maybe this is where we draw the line in the sand. Maybe with Simsy and say, not us, it's up to us, but as the hockey community, the UK hockey community, say, right, that's you. No more of this stuff. Because this is your last chance, basically. But anyway, moving on. Team GB, including Peaks and Sully, no Haywood, and no Ben Davis, surprisingly, and the inclusion of friend to the show, Brendan Brooks. Kind of 28-man squad. There's a few folk in here, again, you could argue. Kind of surprised, again, obviously we're biased, that Matt Haywood missing out, and I don't know, Ben Davis as well. I don't know, we've only seen him, I think we've seen him twice come up to Braehead since he moved to Coventry, and it's difficult to tell how a guy's played when you've only seen him twice, but great to see Brooksy. Now he's got his passport, look quite chuffed for him, and I'm probably assuming, but you'd like to think he'd make the final squad in the final cut, and we'll see Brooksy playing for Team GB in the not too distant future.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I'm not that surprised about Matt Haywood's exclusion. I think Matt Haywood has to be like a top two line forward to get noticed up here for GB inclusion. It's just the way it is. Peaks obviously is a long-standing member of that GB squad and should be included, and Peaks' form itself, as we talked about just recently, has certainly come back to far more what we were expecting as the season's gone on. Like I say, Matt Haywood, he's played well, but he doesn't get that much ice time, and yeah, I think when you play
he
up
does
here,
do quite well ice time. Come on.
Yeah,
I don't think that's fair to say.
Yeah,
there's people in that squad who aren't getting as much ice time as him for other clubs. And how often's Pete Russell been up to Braehead to see him play?
That's my context. My context is what I just said. You have to do a lot more when you play up here to get noticed by Pete Russell. I think
you're absolutely right, and it's terrible.
And that's where I feel sorry for him. And I felt that I've always felt that way about players that play up here. Certainly for as long as Pete Russell's been the manager. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Ben Davis, likewise, as you say, we've not seen much of Ben Davis. I think he's had a fairly reasonably quiet time of it since he came back and started playing for Coventry. So again, likewise, he's he's probably not done quite enough to get himself on the radar. So, but yeah, as far as Brooks is concerned, delighted for him. And yeah, I would like to see him get into that final 23. I think that'd be good for the GB squad, and obviously good for him, and I'm sure it'll be thoroughly deserved.
Do you think Matt will just want to spend some time